Good afternoon. My name is Dave Dykman. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us for the final day of the Cornet Carolinas mega event. This morning's session is how Siemens is using workplace technology to safely return 100,000 employees. Very relevant topic for today. Before we start, I'd like to remind everyone to keep yourselves on mute. Questions are welcome and encouraged, but please submit them through the chat function and they'll be addressed during the program. Today's session is being recorded and will be shared by the chapter after the event. Cornet Carolinas would like to thank our sponsors. Our 2020 Diamond sponsors are CBRE, DPR Construction, and JLL. We also thank our annual sponsors. Your support of the Carolinas chapter is greatly appreciated. This year's mega event sponsors are Alfred Williams & Company, CBRE, C-Design, LS3P, McVeigh and Mangum Engineering, and Turner. Our session sponsor today is LS3P. They have asked us to share the following message. The significance of our values, vision, and mission extends far beyond the words. Unified language is important. However, even more valuable is our shared understanding of the tenets which are critical to our collective success. These foundational ideals define who we are and what we do and how we do it. Each LS3P team member is a critical representative of our firm, and each is empowered to implement our vision, values, and mission each day. Together, our vision, values, and mission become the foundation for our work, provide direction for our future, and structure our daily efforts towards collaboration, community, and a higher level of achievement. Again, we thank LS3P for sponsoring this session. Before I turn it over to Hunter, we want to remind everyone of two upcoming chapter events. On October 8th, there's a virtual buildings tour and real estate strategy discussion. End users in the Triangle market will walk through newly constructed office space. And the virtual core awards will take place on November 5th. Registration opens this Monday, October 5th. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce Hunter Fleshwood, Head of Client Partners for Comfy.
Thank you, David. And thank you to all of our sponsors, and thank you for the Mega Event Committee and the work you've done to put the Mega Event virtual this year. It's been a fantastic week of sessions. I've attended most of them. I hope you have too. And welcome and thank you for joining us for today's session. As David said, I'm Hunter Fleshwood. I'm a member of the Cornet Carolinas board. We're glad to be part of the mega event this year. I also serve as head of new business sales at Comfy, which is a Siemens company. Comfy provides CRE technology to enterprises to enhance the employee experience, to ensure safe and healthy workplaces, to capture data and insights to make decisions about your portfolio and workplace, and to optimize building performance. In today's session, we're going to share a story of how Siemens deployed technology to ensure the safe return of 100,000 employees to 600 locations in 50 countries. I have two of my teammates here today to share the story. Owen Glubiak leads global customer success for Comfy and is also responsible for deploying Comfy to the Siemens global portfolio. Owen's background is in energy management and renewable energy programs. He's a certified energy manager based in Boston. And Wes Krutzinger, global leader in Siemens CRE organization. Wes leads major international programs and provides real estate guidance for Siemens M&A activity, including the recent spinoff of Siemens Energy. Prior to Siemens, Wes was with EY, where he advised corporate real estate organizations and institutional investors. He's lived and worked in the US and the UK, and now lives in Munich. Wes and Owen are going to share this story for about 20 or 25 minutes. We'll have some polls as we go, and then we'll have a Q&A session at the end of their content. Gentlemen, take it away.
Great. So thanks, Hunter, and thanks to everybody in the CoreNet community. Hailing all the way up here from in Boston, where it's actually a sunny day today. That's nice. To kick it right off here, I think what I want to do is describe sort of a little bit about the partnership between Siemens Real Estate and the Smart Infrastructure division, which is what Comfy is part of. You know, when this crisis occurred in the March time period, and even before that, you know, we needed to come up with a different solution to help out bringing our employees back into the office and just identifying with where we were at as a company. And luckily, we'd already had conversations going as both entities have been discussing our services for quite a while. We had to pivot. We had to pivot pretty quickly as we were doing this. And you know, some of the things that we did right off the bat was sort of identifying what we needed to do. And that was we needed to scale across the global organization and really target safely returning employees to the workplace. So that was our primary objective in this. And with that, you know, Siemens is a digital leader in a lot of things, and workplace is absolutely one of them. So having a digital foundation for Siemens was imperative for this new normal working model. And we like this tagline of saying workplace technology is an enabler. It's fundamental to the core of who we are as a business. And you know, what does this look like in total? It's a massive footprint. And I'll hand it over to Wes to go through, you know, the broader Siemens real estate portfolio and talk a little bit more about what that looks like.
Yeah, thanks, Owen, and thanks to everyone for joining today. I appreciate that you take the time to spend with us, and glad to be here dialing in from Munich, Germany. I think in order to give some context on the overall project that we're working on, it's helpful to have a bit of background about the Siemens real estate organization. So as a global company, we have a massive portfolio with 1,200 locations across 70 countries and over 8 million square feet of space, so quite big. But in addition, it's also important to note that the Siemens Real Estate organization has P&L responsibility. And what that means is we have a mandate to deliver value to the Siemens company. And we also have a mandate to deliver value to our tenants, which we lease the space to the different Siemens businesses. So in order to do that, we need to create a value proposition for them to make the space both usable and attractive. So going from the broader portfolio, it's interesting to look at how do we drill down into the scope for this particular project where we roll out the return to workplace. In thinking about those 1,200 locations and 8 million square meters, it's roughly half office, half industrial, half owned, half leased. And really our key focus has been mainly around the white collar workers in office spaces, making sure that there is a coordination on the workplace for them. And so in looking at that, looking across the portfolio, doing the analysis through our local teams of what are the important locations, we really drilled down to a portfolio of about 600 locations across 50 countries with about 100,000 employees that are affected by this. And so the scope of that is, of course, massive, and trying to address a global crisis like the COVID, it really creates a couple of challenges: scale and speed. So how can we roll out technology to our employees in a fast way and across so many different countries and employees to make sure that they get the right communication that they need to keep them healthy and healthy and safe, but also to manage the workplace capacities so that we are really kind of protecting them in the workplace.
Yeah, and just to chime in here on the location selection, because that is a huge difference in the way that we had approached locations. I think one of the things you're going to hear throughout this whole segment, and as a project team, we learned very early, is flexibility is key. You're not going to solve all problems within a central project team. You need to allow sort of flexibility to add and remove different things and let people solve problems locally. So in this case with location selection, how we were able to select those locations is we identified the 600 locations, which primarily came out of Siemens real estate. But then we allowed a process so that as new locations could be added or removed from it, that could occur and information could flow up to us. So this is important because as real estate owners, you have this massive portfolio. Inevitably, there's going to be changes in your portfolio as you go, as I'm sure many of you are considering consolidating spaces or even reducing the size of the spaces you currently have. So we needed to have flexibility in a process for us to add new locations and change leases, add new locations based on leases that are changing. So that just to kind of put in this theme of flexibility early on in our segment here.
Yeah, great. And so I think, when you look at a topic as big as COVID and you look at the scope of what we are trying to roll out, it's so big that it's helpful to break down the challenges into different phases so that you can address them incrementally rather than trying to address it all at once, because the challenges are different within each phase and the solutions are different within each phase. So, I mean, you think about it, starting 6 months ago already, this topic really became front and center on everybody's mind with the crisis management. How do we deal with this as a Siemens organization so that we can keep people safe and we can manage the business in the workplace? And so really the challenges in the first phase really were around the health and safety of our employees within the workplace, but then also communication, because so much uncertainty and so much fear in the market. And it was important to make sure that there's strong communication channels with those employees. And of course, we're all inundated every day with emails and social media feeds through our corporate social media networks and other places. And so having something that can deliver direct communication right to the employees' mobile phones was important, and stuff that could deliver really relevant topics specific to their locations is important, so that it doesn't get lost in the barrage of feeds that we get otherwise in our days. Second phase is the return to the workplace. And this is, I think, something where from a Siemens perspective, we're starting to see more and more of across our portfolio as we've worked our way through the crisis management phase, and now people are returning to the workplace. And I would say for us, given the fact that this is across a global portfolio, it's really different in every country depending on the situation there and their own kind of guidelines. But what's important there is, again, also keeping people healthy and safe, but from a workplace tool perspective, making sure that they have the right features and functionality that enables them when they are in the office place to have the kind of tools and features that are important to them. So a little bit different than simply the crisis management phase. And then of course with the new normal, I think the biggest challenge there is simply uncertainty. And maybe the biggest challenge of COVID overall is the uncertainty it's brought to the marketplace, the uncertainty it brings to the operations of your business. How are you supposed to manage risk? How are you supposed to define your strategies given that kind of uncertainty? And perhaps real estate is, as or more affected by that than most other different sectors or industries. So for us as a Siemens real estate organization, it's hugely important to have a strategy and then make sure that we have the tools in place to try to most effectively manage that strategy going forward. So Hunter, I think you wanted to ask a polling question.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you for going through these phases. And, as CRE practitioners, CRE professionals, CoreNet members, these phases. We've also adopted some new vernacular the last 7 months. The global work from home experiment. I don't think I ever said that in February. RTO and RTW, we all know what those 3-letter acronyms mean. Workplace reentry, the new normal as it applies to workplace. This is what we're working on now, and you and your companies and clients are dealing with this now. We do want to hear from you. Where is your company currently in managing through these phases? Are you in crisis management, trying to resume business and productivity? Are you planning for and starting to bring people back to work, phase 2, workplace reentry? Or have you gotten back to work in what you define as the new normal? Please let us know. All right.
Okay.
Those results are somewhat similar to this morning's session. Owen, what do you think about these results?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's not surprising. I'm glad to see that folks are returning back to the office. I think one of the things we talked about this morning a little bit is how this is going to be a fascinating experience, and how it's kind of sad at the same time that where we're at in the particular phases of bringing people in, and I think sad is really a kind of a way to put it. It's just kind of like, hey, are we allowed to go back in the office yet, or are we still going to wait, or what's going on? But I think what we see across our broader portfolio is the same kind of distribution. You still have locations globally that are still in the point where they're on total lockdown. I think honestly, the Western US is probably a prime example of that. The fire has definitely exacerbated some of those problems. But then phase 2 is kind of what we had all predicted over the summer, is that you would see a lot of folks starting to return to the office, hopefully this fall. And I'm glad to see that that's starting to happen down in North Carolina. So good to know.
Let's get another piece of feedback from the audience related to that question. And the majority of you are in workplace reentry, but you probably all have different timelines. Related to workplace reentry, and this is beyond the first essential critical functions. When is your company going to bring people back in mass on schedules? Is that already underway? Do you anticipate that starts by the end of this calendar year? Have you planned to do that in 2021? Or are you still uncertain and gathering information? Let us know. So, Wes, looking at these results from the audience, how do you compare and contrast that to what you're experiencing and seeing at Siemens?
Yeah, I think the results are actually a little bit different than we saw in the morning session. And I'd say, maybe the sometime in 2021 could be a little more realistic than we'd like to think. I think sometimes we're a bit over optimistic. And as I mentioned, uncertainty before. But to me, uncertainty is still a huge part of the full return to the office. I think across the globe, people are starting to go back now. But I mean, as wave 2 pops up in Europe and other parts of the world, it's hard to say exactly what that timeline will be. So I think people are still targeting this year, but sometime 2021, that could very well be right, and uncertain is, I think, spot on.
Yeah, the pandemic impact certainly has not been predicted with accuracy. Larger enterprises have many risks to manage, and so taking caution in putting that reentry off is a wise decision. It looks like a lot of people are taking that course. Let's go next to how we use technology to enable workplace reentry. Owen?
Yeah, absolutely. I think with this project, we decided to break it up into different portions to make it so that we could accomplish what we needed to in the timeline that was given to us. So with phase one, this is sort of a combination between your crisis management mode and your workplace entry. It was not turnkey solutions. It was something we developed in this process, slightly different than our existing products. And we really focused on two different areas. One was, how do we get communication to employees? As this was a very important topic that needed to get done, is what are the global policies? What are the country level policies? What are the local policies? How do we disseminate this information so that people can easily have access to it? And per Wes's comment before, the mobile experience was the best way to do that. So you can see here on this page, we divided it into these cards, is what we call them in Comfy. It all goes on our homepage. You can see the topics and how it was broken down. Best practices in the office. That may be something that the country region is saying, okay, this is what we need to do to stay compliant in Switzerland or in Israel. You've got your health status. The surveys that happened throughout, and we had a question this morning around, how often do you send out surveys? What do you do with surveys? And I think our response was, it depends on the region. We had certain countries, Germany was one where they have very strict workers' council policies, and many of you probably know that, where we had to go through additional layers of approvals. In other countries where it was, we need to have this tomorrow, now, get it to us right now to stay compliant. So you have to be adaptive to whatever the local requirements are. And I know Wes is going to talk more about sort of the approval process, but phase one really targeted this communication piece for us so that we could make sure it was flexible enough to have both kind of the corporate level policies and the local level being distributed to employees. In addition to that was also how do locations stay compliant with local capacity regulations. So this was another area that we needed to provide a tool to different locations around the globe. And so we quickly were able to devise something to help with capacity management, at least at the location level for our employees. So those are the main things with phase one. And I think as we start to develop and look more, we're trying to build out what a broader kind of new normal looks like. And so that's where we have our phase two, which isn't really just solely focused on workplace reentry. It's also new normal as well. So sort of a combo again of both those two segments. Phase two was really targeted at making the employee experience productive while they're in the office, and then giving you more granularity as real estate owners of how the space is being used and how the portfolio is being used. So in this case, focusing on the employee experience. One, we don't want you turned away at the door because there's not enough capacity in the building. That's not a good employee experience. So we made sure that we accomplished that. The second one is workplaces are changing to be more dynamic collaborative spaces. Siemens has a policy of working from home 2 to 3 days a week going forward here. So you may not get in the office as much. And when you are, you want to be as productive as humanly possible. A lot of this is centered around being near people that you need to work with. So finding kind of, hey, where are my coworkers sitting? How can I book a desk that's near them so that when we have this project and this deadline that's Friday, I can book a desk Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday with my team so we can get these different things done. That was important for us to make sure that employees had the tools and resources that they needed to stay productive while they're in the office. Then take all those employees' interactions, all that data that's being collected, and put it into an analytical engine that can be used by real estate owners. So a couple different areas are important. One is, while people are in the space, what are they using? What are some of the things that are important to me and to my team so I can build out my space to be as effective as humanly possible for employees? Those 12-person conference rooms, maybe they're not as effective anymore. Maybe you need to make them 8-person. Maybe you need to have more huddle spaces and more private workplaces that can accommodate 4 people in that particular room. So it just depends, and you can't make these decisions because every company is different without that particular data set. And so that's what we were trying to devise, is how to get this data to the real estate owners so that they can make effective decisions about what was working for their employees and what was not. And by the way, that changes depending on where you are too. Certain business divisions, certain countries, you have different cultures as well that kind of go into this. So that's also very important. And then finally with that is, how do I operate my portfolio at large? What's my utilization? What's my capacity? The classic cost savings decisions that you're all going to need to make is, do I need to consolidate my real estate portfolio? And how do I know what's appropriate and what's not? Is it 35%? Is it 32%? This will help you be able to kind of get this data so that the real estate owners can make more effective decisions.
Thanks,
Okay,
Owen.
I think with that, I can kind of kick it over actually to Wes. Sorry, the transition. But I can kick it over to Wes to kind of talk about, what did we learn in this whole experience? So Wes, if you want to talk a little about what we learned in this experience.
Yeah, I mean, this is a massive project. It's a project that's still going on, but I think if we look at it as a case study, it's helpful to understand, some of the lessons learned from it. And I think first and foremost, at the center of it, in my perspective, as the project leader, is what is the value proposition to the user? And so we have this product, we have this workplace tool that we're rolling out, but we have to think about it, what is, from the user's perspective, of what creates value for them. And I think how we looked at it, number one, is having features that will meet the different phases of the user experience. So as they return to the workplace and as they move into the new normal, so that the timeline coincides with what they're doing. But secondly, I'm a real estate guy, but a user uses things from across the whole organization, not just real estate. So one of the key things that I think was critical for us was to really break down the barriers and cross silos of the Siemens organization. And by that, we brought in stakeholders from HR, IT, communications, EHS, and of course our real estate and workplace people as well. And in doing this, we were able to create features that are important to the user, so that they can get their corporate news feeds on the latest Siemens news. They can address IT topics and HR topics. They can book a desk. They can do all of this on one platform. And that was important because on my phone before this project, I had 9 Siemens apps. And if this was just the 10th app doing one thing, I don't think people would use it. We had to create something where people can go and they can address different topics as they would want to do it all in one place. So what that means is having a platform that is both scalable and customizable. And so you see this last point about the global plan. It's something that we could roll out globally, but it also creates the ability to customize it to local use. Thinking about, there's different countries with different languages, different culture topics, other topics, things that are specific to what they need in their countries and at their locations. And even beyond that, within a given location, you may have topics that come up that you need to be able to send out a push notification because the parking lot is closed, or there's some other thing that you need to inform your people. So it was very important that even with the scale of this, that there had to be enough flexibility and versatility to be able to enable the local teams to have some ownership and control over this. And so I think that was very important. But all of this is only possible if you have the right team in place. And perhaps one of the silver linings of COVID was it was crystal clear to everyone within the Siemens management community, from the board and the CEO and everyone down, that we needed to have some response to keep people safe and healthy, and we needed to communicate. And so having this workplace tool, we had the buy-in from members of the board, the chief technology officer, the CEO of real estate. All of these people all gave us not only the financial backing and the mandate to do this, but they also have been key proponents of it in the communication channels to the broader Siemens community. And I think having that buy-in from management has really given us the power to really put this out there as something that is a tool that the Siemens community can really adopt and use as part of their daily work life. But also, as I mentioned with the team, having stakeholders from the different departments, it really helped us, create the kind of features and things that we think hopefully employees will find valuable.
And if I could chime in for a second as well. So I think a couple key learnings with this one too, as Wes was mentioning, the flexibility. Starting this whole process, I didn't realize how much I would love Microsoft SharePoint, but we learned a lot in this as we were trying to disseminate information down to the 600 locations and make sure that they had the resources they needed to deploy this successfully. So you need to define sort of when do you need employees to start doing something? And in this process, like this was a challenging thing to identify, because typically what we have is a launch, meaning that you have something that you're definitively asking employees to do, or that is available to them. With this new normal way of doing things, different locations are bringing employees back into the office at different times, which means they got to decide when they needed employees to make certain actions, such as you need to register within the Comfy app before you come into the building. It's a fundamental change to their work environment, and we need to give the right assets to the different locations so that they could make that an effective marketing campaign and change management process for those different folks within their building. So just a couple other points that is, we centralized everything through Microsoft SharePoint and then did trainings to allow people to get to these central areas to pull information out of it and then customize it for their own locations and make it work for them, which was a good learning as well through this process.
Yeah, I think that's really a critical point, Owen, that I think one of the key things when you're doing something like this is really over communicating with the local teams, because as a central project team, we live and breathe this every day and we know the topics, but when you think about people spread over 50 countries, they are not part of it every day. And if you don't provide them the right guidance and feedback and the right tools to roll this out, then, they won't be successful. So I think over communication has been a very important part. And there is, while we have a central project team, there are roles and responsibilities at the local level, exactly as Owen said as well, to make sure that this gets rolled out. There's input that's required, data input, floor plans, other stuff that has to be collected. And so there needs to be kind of a clear organization and structure around that to make sure that that happens appropriately and in a timely manner.
Great learnings. And I know you both would agree that we're still learning and there's still stuff to figure out in the new normal. We're going to do a poll in just a second. Before we pull that up, I want to remind folks that we're going to have some Q&A after, if you want to drop questions in the chat. We talked about how Siemens has used technology to return people to the workplace. One of the great things about CoreNet is sharing stories and hearing stories from peers. Last poll, we'd like to hear from you. How is your company using technology to support a return to the workplace, return to the office? And you can check all that apply here. Communicating critical information, managing shifts and waves, A days, B days, collecting health attestation to ensure they're healthy, check-in, admittance, and reserving space that you know is clean and distanced. If you have other ways you're using technology, we'd love to hear those too. You can just drop them in the chat, but check all that apply here on this list and let's see what sort of results we get. Wow. We had communication was most popular this morning. It was not 100%, but organizations large or small, when something is so impactful, practically and emotionally, I think communication is key. Wes, I love what you said about 9 Siemens apps. A 10th one might have gone unnoticed, and it's important to consolidate that communication. Any comments, guys, on what you're seeing here?
No, I'm not really surprised by this. I would expect that these are the key topics that people would find useful. I mean, that there's no better direct way for organizations to communicate with their employees than directly through a feature like this. Absolutely.
Interesting results.
Totally agree.
As we move to questions and Q&A, I'm going to stop the share. So if you want to put yourself in gallery view, I love to do that and see people. If you are so inclined to turn your video on, I'd love to see your face as we do some Q&A. We've got one question in the chat I'll start with. And let me pose this to you, Wes. Is the app a primary means for communicating changes to the workplace and new workplace protocols?
I would say what's important here is there's actually has to be multiple communication channels, because you have to appreciate that within a workplace, not everyone receives information in the same way. So we deliver the communication through the app itself. We can send push notifications. There's our social media feed for a location pulls up directly. So if there's something related to a specific location, people can see that directly through the app, which I think helps so it doesn't get lost in other stuff. But then I think, you know, through our corporate communications to the homepage on our website, and it's just a lot of different ways to try to get the same message out there.
Thanks.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. You need that multiple means of communication. It's not just one avenue. It's usually multiple, right? So your social media, your internal chat functions, your digital and physical signage. It's just, we tried to ping everybody from multiple angles so that it was as clear as day in terms of how you get the message out about what they're supposed to do. Comfy's just a great way to centralize that for them.
Oh, and
I would say. Go ahead, Hunter.
We'll move. Let's move on to this one. This one's really interesting, and Owen, it may stump you because we've got a flexible policy around being permitted to come back. But my friend Simon Davis asks, approximately what percentage of Siemens employees have we reboarded or allowed admittance to the office?
Oh, I don't think I can answer that one. I can more talk about sort of our growth rate. I think we've grown in terms of, and this is the tough part, in terms of how different offices are coming back into the office. You know, adoption has been key for us, right? That's how you're going to measure success with this is, are people using this tool, or they continue using this tool? And then do you get the qualitative feedback around how much they value the tool? So you can use both quantitative and qualitative metrics. So I'll redirect that question into more of a, because I can't answer all of that, as it's mostly, you know, at the local levels. I can talk more about how many people are using the application and the importance of it. So we've seen very steady growth since, I would say, the end of July into August, starting September 1, with really picked back up, especially in the European countries, as many people returned from the summer holidays, and now we're coming back in the office. There's just been huge spikes in our overall usage in the application. For instance, you know, we're expecting 25,000 people in India to start using this as a compliance means. I know that's a bit of a moving target, as India itself as a country is a bit of a moving target. But that's kind of the level of growth that we look at when it comes to adoption. So I would say, like, how do you know this globally? I can't speak to how many people are coming back into the office, but I can speak to, you know, what are some of the areas that people are coming back to, and how are they using the application?
Yeah, Hunter, I mean, from a real estate perspective, our offices are open, so people are able to access them, but in many countries, it's, you know, only on an as needed basis when you kind of have a topic with your supervisor or something. So the office is open. Technically, people are allowed to come back, but often it's still on a limited basis, and it does vary country by country.
Great. Another great question from Vic Bangia, and this is an area that is of great interest and importance to me and our company, and I'm sure you all share this. This may be a tough one for you guys to answer too, but give us some of your thoughts on how are we addressing wellness and mental health in our workplace reoccupancy strategy? And then he asked the holy grail question, how are we measuring productivity for remote work? Some thoughts there, maybe first on measures we're taking, features we're providing, maybe to help with that wellness, that psychological wellness and confidence. Wes, you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably the wellness is a bit outside of the real estate realm and more in our HR field, but I would say that there are, networks in place within the broader organization that you can contact. And you're absolutely right. I mean, the trauma that this has caused on all of us, regardless, big or small, certainly exists. And so, not something to be ignored. So yeah, I would say from a corporate HR perspective that there are systems in place for managing those times. And what was the second part to your question, Hunter?
Yeah, Siemens as a whole, and this is going to probably spread across functions too. How is our enterprise measuring productivity from the remote work that we've been in and we will be in? I don't know if you caught this earlier, but Siemens has stated a policy, you're welcome to work from home 2 to 3 days a week, regardless of where you are in function. Certain exceptions there, but for the most part. What do you think there, Wes?
Yeah, I mean, there's not specific metrics that I'm aware of to measure the productivity, but I think overall, the feedback so far is that it's worked pretty well and that there hasn't been a significant change in the functionality of our businesses. So I think, we've all experienced that you find a way to make it happen. And as an organization, it seems to still work.
I'll go back to one part on safety. We display a lot of information, and we can display and push notifications when a floor or a building's capacity has been reached. We can tell people exactly when to come in to manage lobby traffic and massing. Owen shared a variety of cards, we call them tiles, on our homepage. One I've seen deployed at other clients it says something like, if you have any health or safety concerns, send them here. And that feedback is anonymous, or it goes to a control set of people to respond to. Just those sorts of messages, I think, have helped with that confidence of returning to the office, knowing that things are controlled and measured.
Yeah, agreed. And I can speak to the second part of it, the measuring productivity for remote work. While Wes and I we're more focused on the people coming into the office, it is a very valuable question. I think if I could redirect it more towards productivity in general and helping people with remote working, I think that's what we're trying to address and develop the right key performance indicators to start measuring how helpful is this experience for people returning into the office. So I agree with the sentiment of that. I just think it's a very, very challenging topic to start measure in a quantitative way. And I think our approach is probably to use more qualitative through surveys that we'll send out to employees.
Hunter, maybe we could reframe the question a bit around, as we move into the new normal and the topic comes around working more flexibly, how do you track and how do you measure the use of space? And that, I think, is certainly an area within the corporate real estate realm that we are very focused on. So within the SRE community, one of the the key strategy analysis right now is around the new normal, where we are working with our Siemens tenants to really understand their need and use for space across our portfolio, and then optimize our portfolio accordingly based on that new normal need for it. And so we'll certainly see, tenants deciding to reduce space as they have kind of more of a flexible office environment where people come in. There's a greater density because you have people sharing spaces. And so from a measurement and tracking perspective, of course, we have the workplace tool where you can book a desk, and that'll be important to make sure that there's some coordination on that so that you don't have everybody coming to the office at the same day. But then also from the analytics side, so that the businesses can really have greater transparency on how their space is being used, so that they can make better decisions on their space requirements in the future. And I think that'll really be one of the key drivers that comes out of the new normal.
Thank you for that. Great questions. I think we're about at time. Again, one of the things I've loved with Coronet over the years is hearing what other companies do and are doing to respond to something as serious as this pandemic, or just to adopt a trend or new practice. So it was our pleasure to share this story with you all. Hopefully you found it informative. I appreciate you giving us some time to listen today, for your great questions, for your poll answers. David, would you mind concluding the session for us?
Yes, thank you, Hunter, Owen, and Wes. It was a great discussion. Thank you. Thank you to all of our attendees, and of course to our sponsors. And we look forward to seeing everyone at the Core Awards. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.